You know, the whole debate about whether we should be spending time and money on space exploration when Earth is facing a climate crisis is really interesting. A lot of people feel strongly on both sides, and I get why. On one hand, Earth is our home, and we're seeing the devastating effects of climate change all around us. So why should we be investing in space when our own planet is in trouble? But then there's the other side of the argument where people say that space exploration is crucial for the long-term survival of humanity and that it brings us technological benefits we wouldn't otherwise have. Let's start by talking about what's happening with Earth's climate right now, because honestly, it's pretty alarming. You've probably seen it in the news: wildfires, floods, hurricanes, droughts. It feels like these extreme weather events are becoming the norm, and they're happening more frequently. In 2023, for example, we saw wildfires rage out of control in places like Canada and Greece, and devastating floods in countries like Pakistan and Libya. Millions of people have been displaced, and the damage has been enormous. And the thing is, these disasters are directly linked to climate change. Global temperatures have already risen by about 1.1 degrees Celsius since the late 1800s, and scientists say that if we pass 1.5 degrees, which we're on track to do within the next few decades, things will get much worse. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, has been warning us about this for years, and it's not just about more heat waves and stronger storms. We're talking about rising sea levels, ecosystems collapsing, and even the risk of large parts of the planet becoming uninhabitable. For example, some island nations in the Pacific are already planning for the day when their land will be completely underwater. And then there's the impact on food and water security. When the climate shifts, crops don't grow as they used to. Take Africa, for instance, where droughts are getting worse and farmers can't produce enough food. The United Nations estimates that over 800 million people were food insecure in 2022, and this number is only expected to grow as climate change continues. Plus, as temperatures rise, diseases like malaria and dengue are spreading to new areas, putting even more lives at risk. Now, the economic cost of climate change is another thing that's hard to ignore. A study from Swiss Re in 2021 found that if we don't get serious about reducing our carbon emissions, global GDP could shrink by as much as 18% by 2050. That's massive. Governments are already spending billions on disaster relief and infrastructure to protect against climate impacts, and that number is only going to increase. It makes you wonder, wouldn't it be better to take all the money we're spending on space exploration and put it toward fixing these problems here on Earth? Some people think so, and it's a valid point. On the other hand, the people who advocate for space exploration have some pretty compelling arguments too. One of the main reasons they push for it is that, in the long run, space could be a backup plan for humanity. We've all seen the movies where Earth faces some catastrophic event, a massive asteroid strike, nuclear war, or even runaway climate change. Well, those aren't just Hollywood scenarios. Earth is vulnerable, and space exploration opens up the possibility of us colonizing other planets like Mars or the Moon to ensure that the human race could survive even if something terrible happens here. Elon Musk with SpaceX is already working on a plan to get humans to Mars, and he's serious about it. He talks about making humans a multiplanetary species, which, when you think about it, is an insurance policy for our survival. NASA's Artemis program is another big step in this direction. They're aiming to get humans back on the Moon by 2024, and the idea is that this will pave the way for future missions to Mars. Of course, colonizing Mars sounds like science fiction to us now, but the technology is advancing quickly. In a few decades, we might really see human settlements on other planets. It's an exciting thought, especially if you think about it as a way to ensure the survival of the species, but it's not just about finding a new home in case Earth goes bad. Space exploration has given us so many technological advancements that we use in our everyday lives. For instance, the technology developed for satellites has helped us track climate change on Earth. Satellites monitor things like deforestation, sea level rise, and even pollution levels. Without the space race, we wouldn't have this technology, which is now critical for understanding and addressing the climate crisis. Think about it. The satellites up there are the reason we know how fast glaciers are melting or where carbon emissions are highest. One great example is the European Space Agency's Copernicus Sentinel-6 satellite. which measures sea levels and gives us data on how quickly they're rising. This information is vital for coastal cities that are trying to figure out how to protect themselves from flooding in the future. So, in a way, space technology is already helping us fight climate change. Also, many everyday technologies we take for granted today were born out of space research. The Global Positioning System, or GPS, which we all use for navigation, came from space science. Even medical technologies like MRI scanners have their origins in space programs. So, if we stop investing in space, we might miss out on the next big technological breakthroughs that could help us here on Earth too. Another thing people don't always think about is how space exploration brings people together. Back during the Apollo missions, when NASA first sent astronauts to the moon, the whole world watched. It was a unifying moment for humanity. Today, the International Space Station is a great example of how space exploration fosters international cooperation. You've got astronauts from the US, Russia, Japan, and Europe all working together in space, even when relations between their countries on Earth are tense. That spirit of collaboration could be key to solving global issues, including climate change, because these problems aren't limited by national borders. That brings me to the current situation. Right now, space exploration is advancing quickly thanks to NASA, ESA, and private companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin. They're working on getting humans back to the moon and eventually to Mars. It's exciting, but these missions are expensive. NASA's budget for 2023 is over $25 billion, and that's just one space agency. The cost of these missions leads people to ask whether this money could be better spent on renewable energy or conservation efforts to tackle climate change. After all, switching to renewable energy, like solar, wind and hydropower, could drastically reduce our carbon emissions, but we're still not investing enough to make that shift happen as quickly as it needs to. At the same time, we can't deny that the climate crisis is worsening. The 2023 UN Climate Change Conference, COP28, highlighted how far behind we are in reaching the targets set by the Paris Agreement. Global emissions are still rising, and scientists are warning that we're approaching irreversible tipping points, like the melting of the polar ice caps, that could trigger even more extreme climate effects. It's a race against time, and people are understandably asking whether space exploration is a distraction from the real work we need to do here on Earth. That said, maybe it doesn't have to be an either-or situation. A lot of experts believe that space exploration and climate action can go hand in hand. The technology we develop for space can be used to help solve problems here on Earth. And if we plan future space missions with sustainability in mind, we can make sure that they don't add to the environmental challenges we're already facing. For instance, there's a push to power spacecraft with green energy, which could also help us make advancements in clean energy technology here on Earth. Governments could also adopt a dual investment strategy. Instead of choosing between space exploration and climate action, why not invest in both? The European Union's Horizon 2020 programme, for example, allocates funds to both space research and environmental protection. If more countries followed this model, we could make progress on both fronts. In the end, this debate is really about finding balance. We have to tackle climate change. It's an immediate crisis that's affecting millions of people right now. But space exploration offers hope for the future, not just in terms of survival, but in terms of pushing human progress forward. We don't have to choose one over the other. By investing in both, we can address the challenges we face today while also preparing for tomorrow. So, should we focus on space or Earth? Maybe the answer is that we need to focus on both, because the future of humanity could depend on it.